Is a Trey Hendrickson trade still possible for the Bengals? Well, there's an interesting hypothetical trade offer going around the internet right now, and in this video, I'll explain whether or not it would actually get the Bengals to move him. Hi again, Bengals fans. John Sheeran of A to Z Sports Cincinnati here, and as we sit here in the doldrums of the offseason in early June, I don't think anything has actually changed between the Bengals and Trey Hendrickson. I don't think he's going to show up next week for mandatory minicamp. I don't think we're going to hear anything about him between minicamp and the start of training camp. And he may show up for the start of training camp just to avoid being fined, but I don't foresee him partaking in the majority of any training camp activity. I think he is still very much dug in with his demands, and I think the Bengals are very much dug in and will assume that he will eventually come back to the table and accept whatever offer is in front of him. And on top of all of that, I don't think the Bengals are having any serious trade talks with other teams at this time. And the reasoning behind that has everything to do with timing. If the Bengals didn't get an offer that they wanted to jump at in March and April prior to free agency beginning and the NFL draft happening, they're probably not going to get the offer that's going to make them move at all in the middle of June. Rosters are pretty much set. Cap space has been maxed out around the league, and the nearest NFL draft is still 10 months away. And if there's a team seriously considering trading for Trey Hendrickson, it's probably going to be a contender that has the assets that the Bengals would want to get in return. But again, at this point in the offseason, I don't think they're going to see those assets come back their way, which is why I thought it was interesting that now you had 4 ESPN writers come up with trade proposals that would get the Bengals to send Trey Hendrickson off to another contender. And out of these 4 proposals, I thought the one from Seth Walder was the most interesting one because he was the only one that offered a player coming back in return for Hendrickson. And it's not just the fact that a player was included, but it was who the player was in his relation to the Bengals. The offer had the Bengals trading Trey Hendrickson to the Washington Commanders and getting a 2026 third-round pick, a 2027 seventh-round pick, and defensive tackle Jerzon Newton coming back in return. And guys, I got to be honest with you. When I saw Newton's name included in this hypothetical trade offer, my eyes lit up because he was one of my favorite players, not just defensive tackles. He was one of my favorite players, period, in the entire 2024 draft class. I thought he was an ideal 3-technique defensive tackle for the Bengals to target that year because of his athleticism profile, his production profile, his game tape. It all screamed everything that the Bengals have been missing at that position, really since Larry Ogunjobi was here in 2021. And before that, Geno Atkins' entire career, maybe. I don't understand how the Bengals aren't desperately starved for a player like Atkins or even the one season that they got out of Ogunjobi because they haven't really targeted any player like that since 2021. But I did think that there was a chance that the Bengals would draft Newton because they met with him twice before the draft, once at the Combine, once for a late top 30 visit. And when he was falling into the second round because of a foot injury that he suffered at the end of his college career, I thought the Bengals would potentially pounce on him in the second round, but unfortunately, he went off the board 36th overall, and the Bengals picked 49th, and they ended up drafting another defensive tackle in Chris Jenkins Jr. So I think if the Bengals were offered a player that they were at the very least eyeing in the second most recent NFL draft, well, that means that they would get 3 years of clear roster control over him because he's got 3 years left on his rookie contract. I think that would at least entice them or perk their ears up in these hypothetical trade talks. But then you got to take a step back and you got to take a deep breath and assess the entire situation and realize that you're talking about trading away an all-pro pass rusher for someone who is 22 years old, who's only played 1 year in the NFL, and who fell in the NFL draft for potentially a damaging long-term problem. The whole reason why Newton was there in the second round is because he had this foot injury that clearly impacted how he played as a rookie. So even someone like me, who was firmly in Newton's fan club last year, has to realize that there is definite risk with sending off a known commodity in Hendrickson for someone who only has promise and upside and a large injury question mark next to him. But at the end of the day, this is probably the best kind of offer that the Bengals will get at this point in the offseason for trading away Hendrickson. A team who is going all in, is trying to win now, is not going to give up a player of equal caliber of Hendrickson. They would try to entice the Bengals by giving them someone with a lot of upside, and in this case, someone that they were at least interested in drafting. So as tempting of an offer that it is, I think the Bengals would still firmly decline this offer. But at the very least, including a player may get the ball rolling in some of these hypothetical discussions at least. But that's my take on it, and I want to hear what you have to say. Would you take this deal if you were running the Bengals? Let me know in the comments below.